The iPad mini to be announced October 23rd. The US making flying saucers. Well, at least they were designing them in the 50s. A 20,000 volt Tesla blasting Nerf gun. And Silicon Valley goes Hollywood. All this and more on today's Downloaded. Hey, welcome to Downloaded. This is the show that covers all the big news events of the last week and actually talks about what they really mean. And to help me out, I've got two guests here. First of all, Tekzilla's Patrick Norton, way over there on the right. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us.
Glad to be here.
And from Time Magazine, the editor-at-large, Harry McCracken. Harry, also.
Hey, Jim.
Thank you for showing up.
My pleasure.
It's good to have you here. So, look, we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff today. Bravo's new Silicon Valley reality show, you got to check this one out. And Softbank actually looks like they're going to buy Sprint and Nextel. But first, we're going to check out the Tech Radar. Tech Radar starts with the iPad mini announcement. Now, this has been confirmed. John P. from All Things D. Apple's going to actually have an iPad mini event on October 23rd. Jim D. over the loop says, yep, it's going to happen. They're going to do it in an intimate setting in Cupertino. It's not going to be at the Moscone where they do most of their launches. 3 days before, check this out. And this is, I actually think this is a big, this was not by design. 3 days before Microsoft is launching the Surface.
Or maybe they're afraid that the iPad mini is going to get lost in the incredible explosion of excitement over the Microsoft Surface tablet.
Yeah, it's also 2 days before their earnings. Apple stock has been down this week a fair bit. Do you think that that has anything to do with it, Harry?
Well, it's kind of the last moment they can get it out for this holiday season. Right. There was a rumor it was going to happen next week, which presumably is not true because they would have invited people by now. Right. But you want to have it out by early November at the latest, I would think.
Well, and so let's talk about the Mini for a minute. We've seen a number of 7-inch tablets come out, the Kindle Fire, a bunch of others. They're all pretty inexpensive compared to the iPad. Mm-hmm. Is price a big issue? Do you think Apple's being priced out of the market, Harry?
Well, I think one thing that people are forgetting is that, in theory, this is a 7.85-inch tablet, which sounds like it's just a tiny bit larger than 7-inch. It's actually quite a bit larger because that's a diagonal measurement. Right. So I think the screen is going to look really large compared to the 7-inchers. And there seems to be some intelligence that it's going to be a lot thinner and lighter than people expect. And so I think Apple might get away with charging a little bit more. I think it's also not inconceivable they might match those guys' prices, but have something that's clearly kind of cooler.
I actually think it's going to be a real home run. I think a 7.85-inch, excuse me, is a great one to have. So we'll see what that looks like. This story, speaking of security and the government, this is actually kind of interesting. Leon Panetta, our defense secretary, said the United States is facing possibility of a cyber Pearl Harbor cyber attack that could go after our power grid, our transportation system, our financial networks. Basically, hackers could turn our entire country into Stone Age rubble. Right?
He brought up Pearl Harbor, which is what you do when you want to scare people.
Right. So was this just a scare tactic, Harry?
Well, I don't think of Leon Panetta as being somebody who's into scaring people. And he came to our offices in New York. He came to Time to talk about it with editors there. And I mean, there's clearly stuff to be worried about.
Such as, like, so scare us.
Well, there was this incident in Saudi Arabia where supposedly at least 30,000 computers went down. We seem to have been fairly successful in damaging Iran's centrifuges. Right, and I don't think of our power grid and our power system and places like water processing plants as being all that sophisticated in use of technology. He was trying to get people interested, I think, in laws governing what places like power plants need to do. Well,
the power grid, Patrick, how vulnerable is our power grid?
Well, you know, if you're thinking like, I'm Leon Panetta, I have a really deep and nuanced understanding of asymmetrical warfare. How are people going to make mayhem in the United States? And overloading the power grid, you know, if you could start shutting down traffic lights, or if you could start shutting down the electrical supply that goes to traffic lights, you start creating cascading effects. I mean, you know, you take, you know, electricity out for a few 100,000 people, everything starts to go downhill very quickly in a lot of ways.
So there's some serious stuff here, and well, let's just hope that there's some seriously smart people working on it to try and fix that when it comes out. Hey, this is my favorite story of the week, by the way. This is because I love flying saucers, I think, I believe. But the US government just declassified a bunch of stuff from the 50s where they were actually designing a real flying saucer. You should check out the pictures. Supersonic flying saucer, 1956, code name Project 1794. capable, they were trying to get to Mach 3 and Mach 4, which is almost 3,000 miles an hour. It could go up to about 30,000 feet, which is pretty, or 30,000 meters. I mean, this thing could fly all over the world. Patrick, do you think they ever built this thing?
I think Harry's got the full story, but they built models. The models failed miserably, and they moved on to the next project.
All right, well, so tell me about that. What happened to this flying saucer? Because I want one.
Well, it looks totally like a hoax when you look at the illustrations, but they came from the National Archives, so it seems to be legit. And they did build a small one, which was supposed to go 300 miles an hour, but it only went 30 miles an hour, and it barely got off the ground.
How small is small? Are we talking like 10 feet across or 50
I'm not sure
feet
exactly,
across?
but I think just a little one, as far as I know.
So this is not the reason why in the late 50s and early 60s there were lots of flying saucer, just sort of visions in the sky of people, right? I mean, this wasn't the reason why we think they're UFOs now.
Probably not, but it is fascinating that our government did all this stuff decades ago that we're still learning about.
Maybe flying saucers really are real, right? Isn't this proof that flying saucers are real, Patrick Norton?
Yes, this program was to decoy the Soviets so they wouldn't realize we actually had alien technology at Area 51. So I think we need to finally storm the gates at Area 51 and find out what's buried underground there.
All right, Harry, you with me? We going?
Let's go for it.
Okay, flying saucers, real or not? Yes or no?
Sort of real, but they don't actually work all that well.
Okay, yes or no?
Yes, and they're coming tomorrow.
Okay, our next story, on a more lighthearted side, this DIY hacker, this is awesome, built a 20,000 volt Tesla coil lightning blasting Nerf gun. Now this, I think, is almost as cool as flying saucers. It's this U.S. hacker, Rob Flickinger, and you actually know this guy, Patrick, right?
I know him a little bit. He's an editor up at O'Reilly. He builds really cool stuff. He runs a company that actually now that does user networks, basically like Wi-Fi if you want to do a community-based network and stuff. Really cool, really smart guy. This is epic, though.
Well, so a couple of details here. It cost him $800. Took him 9 months. He used a bunch of cheap everyday objects, old cans, an old TV, a bunch of different things. Harry, are you in awe of his hacking skills or his ability to harness the power of electricity?
The part I love is that it actually is not a Nerf gun, because you can't do it with a Nerf gun. So he built a replica Nerf gun. He made a
he faked out the Nerf gun.
He made a mold of a Nerf gun and made a Nerf gun-like device, but which is not technically a Nerf gun, which is my favorite part.
My favorite part is that he actually debuted it at his wedding reception, right? So
depends on how she reacted to it, Jim.
Let's move on to one more story here today on the short side. Slingbox. Back. I actually brought the original Slingbox with me, which is right here. Pretty revolutionary when it came out 8 or 9 years ago. Would take your cable signal and you see on the back, it would allow you to plug your cable box into it. It's got a tuner here, and it would actually put it out over the internet so you could watch your TV anywhere. They just came out with 2 new versions, the 350 and the 500. And I'm not going to say anything more about it. You reviewed them this week, right, Harry?
I was interested to get reacquainted because there was a period in my life where I was a hardcore Slingbox fan and used it all the time, and then I sort of left it behind. But using it again, I realized why it's so cool. I'm still a TiVo fanatic, and basically what it does for me is it lets me use my TiVo on my phone, my Mac, basically any device that can get on the internet. Sports are a good example of when it's useful, because there's a lot of stuff that in the old days you needed the Slingbox for, but between Hulu and Netflix and all kinds of other stuff, probably the majority of things you can get one way or another sooner or later, but sports and cable news are still hard to get online.
Yeah, sports you definitely need it for. If you're a football fan and you're not where you can watch your game, you can get the Sunday ticket, and you can get the Sunday ticket that works on your computer or your iPad, but it still restricts you geographically. From what I understand, you can't go to Europe and watch that. So still, Slingbox is great for what it does, but the concept getting a little long in the tooth, right, Patrick?
That's what the interesting thing about the more expensive Slingbox 500. I think they're calling it the Sling projector, which is essentially AirPlay. So it's photos and maybe music now, and then videos.
Yeah,
in the future.
just photos right now and videos eventually.
And there was actually another box that got leaked out this week too. Our friends at Boxee just came up with, or was leaked out, a version that has a tuner in it, allows you to hook up to a hard drive, has a lot of other capabilities. Patrick, you got a lot to say on this.
Okay, the big thing about this proto alpha Boxee box is that they've allowed you to attach a tuner before. This time, yes, the tuner's built in, but it has DVR functionality, because the Boxee box with the tuner is like, oh, great, I can watch over-the-air television on my tuner, but I can't record it. The next generation,
pause it, right? Yeah.
The next generation will actually allow you to record stuff, and that's when the Boxee box gets really interesting.
I love Boxee. It's kind of an important company because they sort of initiate a lot of the stuff that everybody else started to do. The original Boxee box from, I think, last year was kind of disappointing, though. So I hope that they are coming back at the idea.
Well, and rumor is they're still working with D-Link on it. So D-Link who made the original Boxee box, so it can't be a complete failure, right? So anyway, we'll be really looking forward to seeing that. And Revision 3 is available on the Boxee, in case you didn't know. So you can watch all your favorite Revision 3 programs, including Patrick Norton's Techzilla. Look, we're going to talk about 2 of the stories. But first, we asked some of the folks in our office what they think of this new Bravo series that's coming out. This is what it looks like.
There's a spirit of you disruption.
Who's set up every meeting we've had so far? Who? Are you crazy?
The competition is fierce.
I don't really care about losing the money. I really care about looking stupid.
I want to help you, but you need to be accountable to me.
95% of startups in Silicon Valley fail.
If you can't handle it, you go mad.
And I'm pushing myself so hard.
I don't usually watch reality TV, though I am interested in Silicon Valley. But this had a little bit too much bikini and too many D-bags.
The first 10 seconds or so of the trailer kind of interested me, but as soon as I saw the people that they got and the situations that they were already in the trailer, I was like, not my cup of tea.
I will be watching the Silicon Valley reality show, but it'll be kind of a hate watch.
I believe it's a complete melodrama and staged and in no way realistic of what real Silicon Valley is.
My first impressions are really boring. A bunch of kids who are incredibly self-entitled, have an overly developed sense of self-worth. Considering how vast and how competitive and cutthroat the business is, you don't get any of that through that video. It looks like a bunch of knobs having fun on their day off. And frankly, I was bored watching it by the middle of this trailer.
I didn't realize Randy Zuckerberg was the executive producer. Randy Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg's daughter. Mark Zuckerberg's sister. Let's call it sister. All right, we're going to move on. SoftBank is in advanced talks. They want to acquire at least 70% of Sprint Nextel. Really interesting story for a couple different reasons. One, Patrick and I both have a history with SoftBank because we were both at Ziff Davis, the magazine company, when SoftBank bought it. So Sun-san, the guy who runs SoftBank, Masayoshi-san, is a visionary who has grand plans and visions, but changes his mind like more quickly than the Real Housewives of Silicon Valley. But he's coming in, but it's a big deal buy it, and a lot of this is because Clearwire, putting out an updated version of 4G LTE, has a lot of the bandwidth that you need to do it, a lot of the spectrum, and really wants to make a killing here and combine it with what he's doing in Japan. Patrick, do you think this is going to work?
You know, we were at Ziff Davis, purchased by SoftBank. I saw Mayoshi-san on a stage telling me about his 300-year plan for his company, and which turned out to be like a 3-year plan where he dumped all the debt he leveraged from SoftBank onto Ziff Davis and left it crippled and wriggling in the water while he went off and made a whole bunch of money doing venture capital stuff. So I think Mayoshi-san's going to make a lot of money, and if I was at Sprint right now, I'd be really uptight.
What do you think, Harry, covering the story, I'm sure, a little bit?
Well, it was pretty obvious there was going to be more consolidation in the wireless industry, but there are a lot of things that can't happen. We learned that AT&T was not allowed to buy T-Mobile. AT&T and Verizon can't merge. Sprint has a challenge because it's up against these two far larger competitors, but it can't merge with them. So the fact that somebody outside the U.S. might pick up Sprint is not surprising at all.
Well, so T-Mobile now bought Metro PCS, right? So number 4 and number 5 coming together. Sprint is number 3. Masayoshi-san comes in with SoftBank. They buy Sprint, if they buy Sprint, or 70% of it. The thought is that they'll figure the Clearwire thing out, end up with a big piece of that, if not owning it outright. And then maybe they go after either T-Mobile or the T-Mobile's Metro PCS combination to create a really strong number 3. You think that's doable?
I love the fact that AT&T and Verizon compete with each other, but I also want other companies and other players, and the stronger the other guys are, the better. Sprint's in this kind of weird limbo. It's not huge, it's not tiny.
Well, so is T-Mobile. I mean, I'm a T-Mobile user, and it's just not fast enough or big enough, and I'm thinking of going to either Verizon or AT&T. Could this create a real alternative to those two, Patrick?
Well, I mean, if Sprint can get its technology together, if Sprint can get its 4G LTE rolling, so its 4G actually delivers 4G performance and not 3G performance, I mean, Sprint's kind of in a complicated position. You know, I don't know. Like, I cannot answer this without being like, SoftBank scares the hell out of me. Good luck, Sprint. Good luck, Sprint.
Good luck. Good luck. But I do think that we need a valid competitor to the two big guys.
Yeah,
because I think a world with, or a country with just two is not enough. I'm not sure three is even enough.
Duopolies are only a little bit better than monopolies.
Right.
I love Dan Hesse, the CEO of Sprint, and I hope he sticks around because I think he's one of the few honest people in charge of a company that large. He always speaks his mind.
Well, it seems like, at least our experience when it was Ziff Davis, that when Masayoshi-san and SoftBank come in and buy a company, they leave the existing people in charge. They just work on a lot of the sort of, I don't know, the benefits of cost cutting and things like that to try and drive it. But again, this is a guy with a vision. This is a guy who really does have a 300-year plan. He changes it all the time. And I think it could be good. Is there a concern that we would have one of our major really telecommunications companies owned by a company that's not in the U.S.?
You mean like T-Mobile?
And Verizon,
if you define them as major, Verizon.
I mean,
right?
Verizon is Vodafone owns a large chunk of that. Nobody thinks about that because the Vodafone brand isn't known here.
And are we concerned that that has, just tying a lot of pieces together, that there are national security implications? Because if a company owns most of your infrastructure and the company is based outside of the U.S., theoretically they could do things that we might not like hacking or other things.
Isn't that what the internet's for? We got to close off the internet from the rest of the world. Matter of fact, we should close off the internet from every house. Every house should be an island. I think it's the only way to save America, Jim.
That I remember that. That was about 30 years ago when I got my first Apple IIe, I think, before the modem came out. All right, so jingoist tendencies aside, thank you very much, guys. Patrick Norton and Harry McCracken for joining us. That's it for this episode of Downloaded. I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank my guests, Patrick Norton and Harry McCracken, for joining me today, talking about the latest stories of this week. Make sure and follow us on Google Plus and Facebook. And by the way, you got to check some of the other great shows here at TechFeed, including Veronica Belmont's new show, Fact or Fictional. Leave your comments down below about what you thought of the show and some of the news stories you might want us to talk about next time around. I'm Jim Louderback, and we will see you again.